Let's start with the dangerous and slowly work our way towards the deadliest viruses on the list. Number 10. SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. Now, I bet you didn't expect to see this one near the bottom of the list. SARS-CoV-2, better known as COVID-19, is the virus that brought the entire world to its knees for over 2 years, and honestly, some of us are still recovering from the trauma of being locked in our houses with nothing but Netflix and our own thoughts for company. This virus has infected over 700 million people worldwide and claimed the lives of nearly 7 million people. Now, those numbers might sound terrifying, but here's the thing. COVID-19 actually has a relatively low mortality rate of around 1 to 3%, which is why it's sitting at number 10. But don't let that fool you into thinking this virus is a pushover. What makes COVID-19 so dangerous isn't necessarily how deadly it is, but rather how incredibly contagious it is. The virus spreads through respiratory droplets, and before you even know you're infected, you've probably already passed it on to half your family during Sunday dinner. Now, if you happen to catch COVID-19, here's what you can expect. For the first few days, you might just feel like you have a mild cold, maybe a slight cough, some fatigue, nothing too concerning. But then around day 5 or 6, things can take a sharp turn. Your fever spikes, your breathing becomes labored, and suddenly that mild cold feels like someone is sitting on your chest. For most people, this is where the story ends, a rough week or two, and then recovery. But for others, particularly the elderly or those with underlying conditions, this is where things get truly terrifying. The virus can trigger something called a cytokine storm, where your immune system essentially goes haywire and starts attacking your own body. Your lungs fill with fluid, your organs begin to fail, and before you know it, you're fighting for your life. What's particularly frustrating about COVID-19 is how it seemed to have a twisted sense of humor. One day you'd feel completely fine, and the next day you'd be knocked flat on your back, questioning every life decision that led you to that moment. And let's not forget about long COVID, where months after recovering, you're still dealing with brain fog, fatigue, and the inability to smell anything, making every meal taste like cardboard. The reason COVID-19 earned its spot on this list isn't just because of its death toll, but because of how it completely upended civilization as we know it. It shut down economies, separated families, and turned toilet paper into a more valuable commodity than gold. But as devastating as COVID-19 has been, it's honestly just getting started on our countdown. Number 9. MERS-CoV, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Now here's where things start to get more serious. MERS-CoV is like CoV-2's much angrier and significantly more lethal older brother. This virus first emerged in Saudi Arabia in 2012, and unlike its famous cousin, MERS doesn't mess around when it comes to mortality rates. While COVID-19 kills around 1 to 3% of those infected, MERS has a brutal mortality rate of approximately 35%. That means if 10 people get infected, roughly 3 or 4 of them won't be making it home for dinner. The virus primarily spreads through contact with infected camels, because apparently someone thought it would be a good idea to get cozy with camels. But once it jumps to humans, it can spread from person to person through respiratory droplets, just like COVID-19.
Now, if you're unlucky enough to contract MERS, your experience will make COVID-19 feel like a gentle massage. The virus targets your respiratory system with ruthless efficiency. You'll start with fever, cough, and shortness of breath, but within days, your lungs become so inflamed that breathing becomes a monumental task. But here's the terrifying part. MERS doesn't just stop at your lungs. The virus can cause kidney failure, and in severe cases, your organs essentially start shutting down one by one, like dominoes falling in the world's worst game. What makes MERS particularly concerning to health officials is its potential for causing large outbreaks in healthcare settings. In 2015, a single infected traveler returning from the Middle East sparked an outbreak in South Korea that infected 186 people and killed 36. The good news? MERS isn't as contagious as COVID-19, which is probably the only reason we're not all still locked in our houses right now. The bad news, when it does spread, it hits hard.
Number 8. HantaVirus, where we encounter a virus that's basically the ultimate introvert. It doesn't like crowds, but when it does make an appearance, it's absolutely devastating. HantaVirus is primarily found in rodents, particularly deer mice, and humans typically get infected by breathing in dust contaminated with rodent droppings or urine. So basically, your spring cleaning routine just got a lot more terrifying. This virus has a mortality rate of around 36 to 40%, making it even deadlier than MERS. But here's the thing that makes HantaVirus particularly sinister. It doesn't spread from person to person, which means every case is essentially someone who got incredibly unlucky. The virus is most commonly found in rural areas of the Americas, and outbreaks tend to be small but deadly. In the United States, there are typically only 20 to 40 cases per year, but with nearly half of those cases resulting in death, it's not exactly a lottery you want to win. Now, if you happen to inhale HantaVirus, here's what your next few weeks are going to look like. Initially, you'll experience what feels like the flu. Fever, muscle aches, fatigue. You might even think you just caught a seasonal bug and decide to tough it out. But then, around day 4 to 10, things take a dramatic turn. You develop something called HantaVirus pulmonary syndrome, where your lungs rapidly fill with fluid, breathing becomes increasingly difficult, and your blood pressure drops dramatically. The terrifying part about HantaVirus is how quickly it progresses. Within hours, you can go from feeling slightly under the weather to fighting for your life in an intensive care unit. There's no specific treatment, no antiviral medication, just supportive care and hoping your body can fight off the infection. What makes this virus particularly unsettling is that it lurks in the most unexpected places. That old cabin you're renting for a weekend getaway? That storage shed you haven't cleaned out in years? These are exactly the kinds of places where HantaVirus loves to hide, waiting for some unsuspecting person to stir up the dust. The virus serves as a reminder that sometimes the deadliest threats come from the most ordinary places, and that's probably why it's earned its spot as number 8 on our list. But trust me, we're just getting warmed up here.
Number 7. Nipah virus. Now here's where things take a massive jump in danger. Nipah virus is like that quiet kid in school who seems harmless until you realize they've been planning something absolutely terrifying. This virus was first discovered in Malaysia in 1998, and it immediately announced its arrival by killing over 100 people in its debut performance. With a mortality rate ranging from 40 to 75% depending on the outbreak, Nipah doesn't mess around. But here's what makes this virus particularly nightmarish. It can spread from animals to humans, from humans to humans, and it has this twisted ability to cause outbreaks years apart, like it's playing the world's deadliest game of hide and seek. The virus primarily spreads through contact with infected bats or pigs, but once it jumps to humans, person-to-person transmission becomes a very real threat. And unlike some viruses that take their time, Nipah can spread through respiratory droplets, contaminated food, and direct contact. Now, if you're unlucky enough to contract Nipah virus, here's what you're in for. Initially, you'll experience fever, headache, and drowsiness, basically feeling like you have the worst hangover of your life, except you didn't even get to enjoy the party. But then, within days, things get significantly worse. The virus has this particularly cruel way of attacking your brain, causing encephalitis. You'll start experiencing confusion, disorientation, and seizures. Some patients describe feeling like they're losing their minds, which technically they are. But here's the most terrifying part. Even if you survive Nipah virus, you're not necessarily in the clear. The virus can cause long-term neurological complications, and there have been cases where survivors experienced relapses months or even years later. It's like the virus leaves a little calling card in your brain just in case it wants to come back for round 2. What makes health officials particularly nervous about Nipah is its pandemic potential. The virus has already demonstrated its ability to cause sustained human-to-human transmission, and with international travel, a single infected person could potentially spark a global outbreak.
Number 6. Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. Number 6 brings us to a virus with one of the most metal names in virology, and trust me, it lives up to its reputation. Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, or CCHF, is primarily spread by ticks, which means your next hiking trip just became significantly more concerning. This virus has a mortality rate of 10% to 40%, and it's found across a surprisingly large area, from the Balkans to Central Asia to Africa. Now here's the thing that makes CCHF particularly nasty. It causes what's called hemorrhagic fever, which is medical speak for you're gonna bleed from places you didn't even know could bleed. If you contract CCHF, your journey into hell begins innocuously enough with fever, muscle aches, and fatigue. You might think you just picked up a mild bug from your outdoor adventure. But then, around day 3 to 6, your body starts to betray you in the most horrific ways possible. The virus attacks your blood's ability to clot, which means even minor injuries become major problems. Your gums start bleeding, you develop massive bruises, and in severe cases, you can experience internal bleeding that turns your organs into a war zone. But wait, there's more. CCHF also causes what doctors call severe mood changes and sensory perception alterations. So not only are you bleeding internally, but you're also experiencing psychological symptoms that make you question reality itself. What makes this virus particularly concerning to healthcare workers is that it can spread through contact with infected blood or bodily fluids. During outbreaks, medical staff have become infected while treating patients, turning hospitals into potential transmission sites. The virus essentially turns your immune system against you, causing a massive inflammatory response that damages blood vessels throughout your body. It's like your body decides to have a civil war, and unfortunately, there are no winners.
Number 5. Lassa fever. At number 5, we encounter a virus that perfectly demonstrates why you should probably avoid West Africa during rodent season, if that's even a real season. Lassa fever is endemic to West Africa, where it infects an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 people annually. With a mortality rate of around 15 to 20% for hospitalized cases, it's not the deadliest virus on our list, but what earns it the number 5 spot is its absolutely massive infection potential and its ability to cause truly devastating outbreaks. The virus is primarily spread through contact with infected rodents, specifically the multi-mammate rat. But here's where it gets particularly concerning. Lassa fever can also spread from person to person through bodily fluids, making healthcare settings potential hotspots for transmission. Now, if you happen to contract Lassa fever, you're in for what can only be described as a medical horror show. The virus typically starts with gradual onset of fever, weakness, and general malaise. For about 80% of people, this is where the story ends. They recover without even realizing they had something potentially deadly. But for the unlucky 20%, Lassa fever reveals its true personality. The virus can cause severe bleeding, organ failure, and neurological complications. Some patients develop facial swelling so severe they become unrecognizable, while others experience hearing loss that can be permanent. What makes Lassa fever particularly terrifying is its unpredictability. You could have 2 people infected with the exact same strain. One person might experience mild flu-like symptoms, while the other person ends up fighting for their life in an intensive care unit. The virus also has this particularly cruel way of affecting pregnant women, often causing miscarriage and having extremely high mortality rates for both mother and child. It's like the virus specifically targets the most vulnerable populations.
Number 4. Kyasanar forest disease. Number 4 takes us to the forests of India, where scientists discovered a virus that's essentially nature's way of saying, maybe don't go hiking today. Kyasanar forest disease, also known as monkey fever, was first identified in 1957 when monkeys in Karnataka's Kyasanar forest started dying in massive numbers. The virus is transmitted primarily through tick bites, with a mortality rate of 3% to 5% for the initial infection. Now, you might be wondering why a virus with a relatively low mortality rate made it to number 4. Well, here's the thing that makes Kyasanar forest disease absolutely terrifying. It can cause a biphasic illness, which is medical terminology for just when you think you're getting better, surprise, round 2. If you get infected with this virus, here's what your nightmare looks like. Initially, you'll experience the usual suspects: fever, headache, muscle pain, and bleeding disorders. Most people recover from this first phase within a couple of weeks, thinking they've dodged a bullet. But then, just when you're celebrating your recovery and posting about it on social media, the virus comes back for an encore performance. This second phase can involve severe neurological complications, including encephalitis and meningitis. During the second phase, patients often experience seizures, tremors, and in some cases, permanent neurological damage. It's like the virus is playing a sadistic game of gotcha with your immune system. What makes this virus particularly concerning is its expansion. Climate change and deforestation have led to increased human-tick contact, and the virus has been steadily spreading to new areas. Recent outbreaks have shown higher mortality rates, suggesting the virus might be evolving to become more dangerous. The virus serves as a perfect reminder that sometimes the deadliest threats are literally waiting in the woods, ready to turn your peaceful nature walk into a medical emergency. But as terrifying as these viruses are, they're honestly just the warm-up act for what's coming next.
Number 3. Ebola virus. Now we're entering the territory where survival becomes more about luck than medicine. Ebola virus, specifically the Zaire strain, has a mortality rate that will make you question why anyone ever thought it was a good idea to study viruses in the first place. With a death rate of up to 90%, Ebola doesn't just kill you, it does so in the most horrific way imaginable. The virus causes what's called hemorrhagic fever, which is medical terminology for you're going to bleed from every opening in your body and probably some new ones the virus creates. If you contract Ebola, here's your nightmare. Initially, you'll experience fever, severe headaches, and muscle pain. But within days, the virus begins systematically destroying your blood vessels. You'll start bleeding from your gums, nose, and eyes. Your internal organs begin to liquefy, and your immune system essentially surrenders. What makes Ebola particularly terrifying is that it spreads through bodily fluids, turning healthcare workers and family members into potential victims. During the 2014-2016 West Africa outbreak, entire communities were wiped out, and healthcare systems completely collapsed. The virus essentially turns your body into a biological weapon, making you highly contagious just as you're becoming most desperate for human contact and care. Number 2. Marburg virus. At number 2, we encounter Ebola's even deadlier cousin. Marburg virus was first discovered in 1967 when laboratory workers in Germany became infected after handling monkeys imported from Uganda. The virus announced its arrival by killing 7 out of 31 infected people, and it's only gotten more efficient since then. With mortality rates reaching up to 88% in some outbreaks, Marburg virus makes Ebola look almost friendly by comparison. The 2017 outbreak in Uganda achieved a perfect 100% mortality rate, meaning every single person who contracted it died. But here's what makes Marburg truly terrifying. It can remain dormant in survivors for months, potentially causing relapses when you least expect it. It's like the virus plays dead, waiting for the perfect moment to finish what it started.
Number 1. Rabies virus. And here we are at number 1, the virus that makes all the others look like amateurs. Rabies has a mortality rate of 99.9% once symptoms appear, making it the closest thing to a guaranteed death sentence in the viral world. That's not 90%, not 95%, that's essentially 100% fatal. Here's what makes rabies the ultimate killer. It attacks your brain directly, causing you to lose your mind before it takes your life. The virus causes hydrophobia, making you terrified of water despite being desperately thirsty. You become aggressive, confused, and hallucinate as the virus systematically destroys your nervous system. But here's the truly terrifying part. Rabies can remain dormant in your system for weeks, months, or even years before symptoms appear. By the time you realize you're infected, it's already too late. The only reason rabies isn't causing global pandemics is that it's relatively difficult to transmit and we have effective post-exposure treatment. But if you miss that window, you're essentially walking dead. Rabies kills approximately 59,000 people worldwide every year, and every single one of those deaths was preventable with timely medical intervention. So, there you have it, the 10 deadliest viruses on the planet. Sleep tight, and maybe think twice before your next exotic vacation.